My wife's friends told her I wasn't in her league. She didn't say a word to defend me, so I walked out and left her behind for good. I never imagined my marriage would fall apart the way it did. But now, sitting here and putting it all into words, I can clearly see every red flag that led up to the moment I packed my bags and walked out for good. My name's David, and I was married to Sarah for 8 years before everything unraveled. What hurts the most is how it all came crashing down right in front of her friends, people she seemed more eager to impress than to stand up for her own husband. Sarah and I met in college, and back then, she wasn't the woman she turned into later. She used to be warm, encouraging, and we shared the same hopes for the future, a quiet life built on love, mutual respect, and maybe a family one day. But after we tied the knot and bought a home out in the suburbs, something changed. She got involved with a group of women from the neighborhood, and over time, their influence completely took over her. These ladies were all married to high-earning men, and they spent their days gossiping over pricey lunches, flaunting luxury handbags, and talking endlessly about expensive vacations, flashy cars, and the latest designer trends. Their husbands were the kind who made 6 figures or more. Mine didn't. Sarah started comparing our life to theirs. Slowly but surely, she began acting like she was embarrassed by my career. I'd been a high school teacher for years, something she once said she deeply admired. She told me she loved that I wanted to help shape young minds and give kids a better future. But suddenly, that same job became something she tiptoed around, as if ashamed. The coffee club met at our place every Tuesday. It was made up of 4 women: Rebecca, married to a big-shot lawyer; Jessica, whose husband owned a successful chain of restaurants; Maria, wife of a doctor; and Linda, whose real estate deals earned massive commissions. The name Coffee Club was a joke. It was really just a weekly get-together for them to brag, compete, and subtly tear each other down. At first, Sarah asked me to stay late at work or run errands whenever they came over, like she didn't want me around. I didn't think too much of it until I noticed how different she was after they left: quiet, withdrawn, sometimes even snappy. She'd make random comments about how we should upgrade to a bigger home or suggest I look into a better paying job. And when I'd ask what was bothering her, she'd brush it off and head to bed early. It wasn't until about 6 months ago that things really clicked. I had to leave school early one day because of a migraine and just needed to lie down. When I walked into the house, the women were gathered in the living room, designer outfits, fancy bags, the works. They were deep in conversation about how much money their husbands made, what kind of cars they were driving, and where they were planning to vacation next. Sarah's face went red the moment she saw me. She awkwardly introduced me, like I was a stranger, even though I'd already met most of them at community events. Rebecca gave me a look that screamed I was intruding, and Jessica barely acknowledged me with a nod. I muttered a quick hello and headed to the kitchen to grab some water, still nursing my headache. From there, I could hear them whispering. I caught Sarah saying I just had a tough day at work. On my way back through the living room, Maria smirked and said something about how lucky I must feel to have summers off, like teaching was just a part-time gig. Her tone wasn't playful, it was condescending. I wanted to tell her that most teachers spend the summer buried in lesson plans, training, or working side jobs just to get by. But before I could open my mouth, Sarah quickly steered the conversation to some new restaurant Jessica's husband had just bought. I took my meds and tried to sleep upstairs, but all I could think about was how they looked at me, and how Sarah looked like she didn't want me there. After that, things went downhill fast. Sarah stopped hiding her gatherings from me. In fact, it felt like she wanted me around just so her friends could compare their husbands to me and feel superior. The way they'd talk over me, make subtle digs, or outright ignore me in my own living room, it all started to feel intentional. And the worst part? Sarah didn't just let it happen, she seemed to feed off it. The jabs became more direct. Rebecca would joke that teachers probably don't understand how real money works. Jessica would gush about her husband's jewelry gifts, casting side eyes at Sarah's modest ring, the one we bought on a tight budget but with a lot of love. Maria often emphasized how hard her husband worked to provide for their family, hinting that I somehow wasn't pulling my weight. Linda constantly brought up their lavish trips and talked about how crucial it was to experience the finer things in life. Sarah never once stood up for me. In fact, sometimes she chimed in talking about how we needed to aim higher or sighing like she was disappointed in the life we built together. She'd go on about how driven and successful her friends' husbands were, and when she looked around our house, cozy, but not extravagant, she suddenly saw flaws instead of comfort. What really stung was how these women made their remarks right in front of me, as if I were invisible. They'd go on and on about bonuses and promotions while giving me looks like I didn't measure up. And Sarah? She just nodded along. I tried opening up to her, told her how I felt like an outsider in my own home whenever her friends came over. But she shut down the conversation fast. Said I was too sensitive. Claimed I didn't understand how women talk. According to her, they were just sharing their lives and I was reading too much into it. But I knew better. I saw the glances they exchanged when certain comments were made. There was something deeper going on. Then one day in March, everything boiled over. It was another short day at school because of conferences, and I got home earlier than usual. The coffee club was already in session in the living room, chattering about some big charity gala they were attending with their husbands. They were bragging about the expensive dresses they'd bought and the large donations their husbands were making to look good in front of others. I greeted them and went to fix myself a sandwich. I hadn't eaten lunch. From the kitchen, I heard them talking about me. Rebecca made some snide remark about how not everyone could afford to attend events like that. Jessica chuckled and said something about how people have different priorities, and not all of them involved ambition. As I passed through with my plate, Maria smiled and commented that my simple life must be so relaxing, free from the pressure and stress that came with real careers. Her tone was syrupy sweet, but the meaning cut deep. Linda chimed in, agreeing that some people are just wired for different kinds of work. My face burned with embarrassment. I was about to speak up, but before I could, Sarah let out a laugh and said, "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to be married to someone more ambitious." She said it with a laugh, like she was joking, but you could feel the tension in the room. Everyone knew she meant it. Her friends exchanged glances, all wearing those smug little smiles like they'd been waiting for her to finally say it out loud. Then Rebecca chimed in, calling Sarah smart and beautiful, saying she probably could have married anyone she wanted. She asked if Sarah had ever wondered what life might have looked like if she'd made different choices. That question sucked all the air out of the room. Everyone went quiet and turned to Sarah, waiting to hear what she'd say. And there I stood, sandwich in hand, wishing I could melt into the floor. Sarah glanced at me for a long second, long enough to feel like a gut punch, then looked back at her friends. She said she tried not to dwell on what ifs because it wasn't fair to compare, but then admitted that sometimes, yeah, she did wonder what it would be like to be with someone who could offer her more experiences, more opportunities. She said she loved me, but that at times, she felt stuck, like we were limited in what we could achieve as a couple. Her friends all nodded like they completely understood what she meant. Jessica jumped in, saying it was important for women to have partners who matched their ambition in class. She added that some people were just naturally more driven. Then Maria said it was hard to grow when you're with someone who's okay staying in the same place. And Linda tossed in that life was too short to settle for anything less than what you truly want. I stood there listening to this, my wife and her friends basically dissecting my worth like I was some failed project, and something inside me cracked. I don't think that part of me ever fully healed. Sarah looked at me again, and this time, I could see it plain as day. She wasn't just saying this stuff in the moment. She'd been feeling that way for a long time, just never had the guts to tell me. I quietly set my sandwich on the coffee table, told her I had some errands to run, and left the house without another word. I ended up driving around for 2 hours, trying to figure out when my wife stopped respecting me, and when she started seeing me as some sort of embarrassment. By the time I got home, her friends were gone, and she was in the kitchen like nothing had happened, casually making dinner. I asked if we could talk. She agreed. I told her I'd heard everything she said earlier, that she sometimes wondered what life would be like if she'd ended up with someone else. That she felt limited by me and our life together. Right away, she got defensive. Said I'd twisted her words, that I was reading too much into it. According to her, it was just a light-hearted conversation between girlfriends, nothing serious. But the way she couldn't meet my eyes told me she knew exactly what she'd done. I said it wasn't just about what she said that day, it was everything leading up to it. The months of little comments. The way she let her friends talk down to me in our own home without ever once sticking up for me. I told her it felt like she was embarrassed by who I was, that she'd rather be married to someone like Rebecca's or Jessica's husband, someone who could flash a black card and whisk her away to luxury resorts. She started crying and said that wasn't true, but then admitted she did feel frustrated sometimes, that she hated feeling left out when her friends talked about the lives they lived. The trips, the shopping, the fine dining. She wished we had more money so she could be part of that world, too. I told her I understood wanting nice things, that I wasn't blind to how hard it must be to feel like the odd one out. But I also said the way she was going about it, by belittling me, letting her friends chip away at our relationship, was killing our marriage. I told her her friends weren't empowering her. They were feeding her insecurities and turning her against the one person who was on her side. Sarah pushed back, said her friends were just successful women with high standards, and maybe I was the one who needed to change. She said maybe I needed to want more, push harder, instead of being okay with where we were. She pointed out how all their husbands had worked their way up and implied that maybe I should be doing the same instead of settling for a career in teaching. That conversation stretched into hours. Things got heated. We both said things we couldn't unsay. She kept defending her friends, saying they were only trying to motivate her to want more out of life. And I kept telling her that they weren't inspiring her, they were making her resent me. The weeks after that were rough. We tried to pretend like things were normal, but everything felt tense and off. I could feel Sarah slipping further and further away from me. She started spending even more time with her friends, and when she came home, it was like she brought their world with her. She'd tell me about their husband's new bonuses, promotions, or big-ticket purchases, always with this tone that made it clear she was holding our life up next to theirs and not liking the comparison. The Tuesday gatherings didn't stop. I started staying later at work or hitting the gym just to avoid being there when they were. But every now and then, I'd come home and catch bits of their conversations from the hallway, whispers about how tired I looked, how stressed I seemed. And then they'd toss around suggestions about how Sarah might motivate me to be more successful. One night in April, I walked in after a long faculty meeting and found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with a bunch of glossy real estate brochures and flyers for luxury cars and high-end vacation spots. She told me Linda had shared some ideas about how we could upgrade our lifestyle, and she wanted to talk about our finances. I flipped through the stack and quickly realized that everything she was showing me required spending money we didn't have or going into serious debt. None of it was even remotely doable on a teacher's salary. Sarah said maybe it was time I started looking into a better paying career. Or maybe I could take on a second job so we could finally start living like her friends did. I told her point blank that I loved my job, that I was good at it, that I felt like I was actually making a difference. And I wasn't willing to give that up just so we could keep up appearances. Then I said maybe if she wanted more money, she could look into getting a job herself, something other than shopping and sipping lattes with people who spent their time tearing others down. That's when she snapped. She said none of her friends' husbands expected their wives to work because they made enough to support them comfortably. And then she hit me with the line that nearly broke me. That maybe the real problem was me. She tried to pass it off like a joke, but nobody in that room thought she was kidding. You could tell by their faces, they all exchanged those smug little smiles like they'd finally gotten her to admit something they'd suspected for a long time. Then Rebecca took it a step further. She said Sarah was a beautiful, intelligent woman who probably could have married just about anyone. And then she asked if Sarah ever thought about what her life might be like if she'd made different choices. Everything went still. They all turned to Sarah, waiting. And there I was, still holding my damn sandwich, feeling smaller by the second. Sarah looked at me, not saying a word, just watching. Then she turned back to her friends and said she tried not to think like that. It wasn't fair to compare, she said. But then she admitted that sometimes she did wonder what life would be like with someone who could offer her more opportunities, more experiences. She said she loved me, but at times she felt like we were limited in what we could do together. Her friends all nodded, like they completely got it. Jessica spoke next, saying women need partners who match their drive and sophistication. She said not everyone is cut out to be ambitious, and that's just how it is. Then Maria added that it's tough to grow as a person when you're with someone who's okay settling for just enough. Linda jumped in too, saying life is too short to spend it with someone who can't give you what you really want. I stood there, listening to these women talk about me like I was some charity case or a speed bump in Sarah's life, and something inside me broke. Something deep. Something I don't think ever healed. I glanced at Sarah, hoping for even the smallest sign she disagreed. But she just stared at her hands, not saying a word. She didn't stop them. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look up. Finally, I asked her if this was how she felt too, if she agreed with everything they were saying about our marriage. She finally looked at me and said she didn't know how to answer that. But she admitted she'd been thinking a lot about whether we still wanted the same things out of life. That's when Rebecca dropped the bomb. She said Sarah had been confiding in them, saying she felt trapped in a relationship that didn't allow her to grow. That she was too kind to say it to me directly, but she had admitted she sometimes felt like she'd settled when she chose to marry me. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to Sarah and asked if that was true, if she really told them those things. She started crying, said she was confused and frustrated, and yeah, maybe she had said some things she shouldn't have. But her emotions were complicated, and she hadn't figured out how to make sense of them. Jessica added fuel to the fire. She said Sarah was a smart, educated woman with potential, and it wasn't fair to either of us to stay in a relationship where one person felt like they were settling. She said Sarah deserved someone in her league, someone who could challenge her and open doors, not someone stuck in a simple life. That phrase, in her league, landed like a slap across my face. It made everything suddenly clear. All the side eyes, all the subtle digs, all the comparisons, they'd been working her for months. And now, they'd finally convinced her that she was too good for me. So I asked Sarah directly, did she think I was beneath her? Was that really how she saw me? The room got dead quiet. Everyone turned to Sarah, waiting for her to answer. And I could see in her face she didn't want to say it out loud. But she also didn't want to lie. Eventually, she said it wasn't about leagues, not exactly. But she did feel like we were in different places now, wanting different things. And her friends had helped her realize it was okay to want more, okay to admit that we'd both changed, maybe in ways that no longer worked together. Rebecca, smiling like she'd just sealed a deal, said that sometimes people grow apart and no one's really to blame. But when a relationship has run its course, it's better to face that truth. She said Sarah was still young enough to start over and find someone who could offer the life she wanted, and that I deserved someone who loved me for who I was, not who they wished I could be. I stood there in disbelief, listening to these women dissect my marriage like it was some broken business partnership. And I realized something that crushed me: Sarah had already made her choice. She'd let their opinions mean more than our vows. She let them convince her that I wasn't a partner, I was a limitation. So I told them all I'd heard enough. I said I didn't need to sit in my own living room and be told by a bunch of strangers that I wasn't good enough for my own wife. Then I looked at Sarah and told her plainly, if she truly felt like she'd settled when she married me, then we needed to have a serious conversation about what that meant for our future. Her friends all exchanged glances, like they'd accomplished exactly what they came to do. And then Rebecca said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the truth is just hard to hear. Rebecca said it was better to face the truth than keep living in denial, and Jessica followed that up by saying they were just trying to help Sarah figure out what would truly make her happy. Then Maria added that they all cared too much about Sarah to sit back and watch her waste her life being unhappy. I looked at Sarah one last time and asked her plainly, did she want me to leave so she could keep dissecting our marriage with her friends, or did she want them to go so we could talk, just the two of us, about what was really going on between us? She glanced back and forth between me and the group, clearly torn. Then she quietly said that maybe it'd be best if I gave her a little space to think. And just like that, I knew it was over. She could have asked her friends to leave. She could have stood up and told them to back off. But instead, she asked me, her husband, to go. That was the moment everything truly collapsed. I went upstairs, packed a small bag with enough clothes for a few days, and the whole time, I could hear them downstairs whispering about what had just happened, like they were analyzing the final scene of a drama they'd been waiting to finish. When I came back down, Sarah was standing in the hallway. She looked shaken, like she wasn't sure what to say or do. I told her I'd be staying at my brother Tom's place for a bit, that I wanted her to have whatever time she needed to figure things out, and that when she was ready, we could talk about what came next. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but I raised my hand and stopped her. I told her I didn't want to hear any more about how I wasn't enough for her. I didn't want to keep rehashing how she felt stuck or how she might have settled. If that's how she truly felt, if she really believed what her friends had been feeding her, then we both deserved better than trying to force a relationship where one person thought the other wasn't worthy. As I walked past the living room, all her friends were still seated, watching everything unfold like it was some kind of live soap opera. Rebecca called out that she hoped I knew they were only trying to help. I turned around and told her flat out what they did wasn't helping. It was sabotage. I said they had spent months walking into my home and making me feel like a failure, and they'd finally succeeded in turning my wife against me. They'd convinced her that the life we built wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. I told them they were the kind of people who couldn't feel good about themselves unless they were making someone else feel worse. And I genuinely felt sorry for their husbands, men who probably spent their lives trying to keep up with women who were never satisfied, no matter what they had. Linda started to respond, but I was already walking to the door. I told them congratulations, they got what they wanted. I hoped they could all pat themselves on the back for helping destroy a marriage. And then I looked straight at Sarah and said I hoped the new life they were pushing her toward, one with someone more worthy, made them all feel better about their own issues. I drove to my brother Tom's apartment and crashed on his couch for the next 3 days, just trying to wrap my head around everything and figure out where I was supposed to go from here. When I told Tom the full story, he was furious. Said those women sounded like toxic manipulators who got their kicks out of wrecking other people's relationships. He told me he'd never liked the way Sarah changed after she started hanging out with them. He said he'd noticed, even at family gatherings, how she seemed almost embarrassed by our simpler lifestyle whenever her friends came up in conversation. Tom said that a good wife stands by her husband and that Sarah had shown her true colors by letting her friends do the opposite. I tried reaching out to Sarah several times while I was staying with Tom, but she never picked up. And when she finally did answer, she told me she still needed time. She wasn't ready to talk. I asked her directly, were her friends still coming around? Still giving her advice about our marriage? She got defensive, said she needed to talk to people who cared about her happiness. That was all I needed to hear. It was clear now, Sarah wasn't going to fight for us. She wasn't going to tell her friends to step back. If anything, she was going to keep letting them steer the wheel while I stood on the sidelines of my own life. And I realized, even if we tried to patch things up, this pattern would repeat. As long as she valued their opinions more than our partnership, we were never going to be on the same team. Over the next week, I kept thinking back to our 8 years together. The highs, the quiet moments, the woman I met in college, the one who believed in me when I said I wanted to teach, who told me she admired my passion. And I kept asking myself, when did she start seeing that same dream as something embarrassing? When did the life we built stop being enough? But no matter how many memories I dug through, I couldn't shake the way she just sat there that day silent while her friends called me a burden. Or the way she chose to send me away instead of standing up for our marriage. The truth hit me like a brick. The woman I fell in love with was gone. The version of her that remained shaped by their constant whispers and comparisons wasn't someone I could imagine building a future with anymore. So I made an appointment with a divorce attorney, someone a colleague had recommended. I spent 2 hours walking him through everything that had happened over the last few months. He listened carefully and told me what I was describing sounded like emotional abuse. That Sarah's friends had basically staged a long-term campaign to chip away at my self-worth and sabotage the foundation of our relationship. He said since we didn't have kids or major assets to fight over, the process should be straightforward. Still painful, but legally manageable. Based on what I told him, he guessed Sarah probably wouldn't contest it. After all, she'd already said she felt unfulfilled. I signed the paperwork that same day. He said Sarah would be served within a few days. And when she got the divorce papers, she called me immediately, crying, asking why I hadn't tried to fix things before making such a drastic decision. I told her the truth, that she made her position clear when she chose to sit quietly while her friends dismantled our marriage. When she agreed with them that I wasn't enough. When she asked me to leave, instead of asking them to go. She sobbed and said she never meant for things to get this far. That she was just confused. But I told her the damage was already done. I couldn't stay married to someone who saw me as a backup plan, a reminder of what she settled for. I told Sarah I couldn't keep living in a place where I felt like I didn't belong. Where the people she invited in made me feel like I was constantly falling short. That wasn't a home anymore, it was just a place where I was being quietly erased. She asked if we could try counseling, see if there was a way to fix things. But I told her this wasn't something therapy could patch up. This wasn't about miscommunication or a rough patch, it was about the fact that she had let go of her respect for me. And worse, she'd allowed others to tell her I wasn't enough, and she believed it. She said her friends were only trying to help her make sense of why she'd been feeling unhappy. That maybe they'd pushed her in the wrong direction, but it didn't mean our marriage had to be over. But I wasn't buying it. I told her real friends don't push you to fantasize about being with someone else, they push you to talk to the person you're with. Real friends help you fix what's broken, not throw it away for something shinier. I told her those women had been slowly turning our home into a place I dreaded walking into. That they had chipped away at our relationship, one smug comment at a time, and she hadn't just let them. She joined in. I said no marriage could survive when one partner allows outsiders to criticize and tear down the other, and that I deserved more than being treated like a mistake she was trying to quietly correct. The divorce process dragged on for about 8 months. We had to split our assets and figure out what to do with the house. Sarah ended up buying me out with money her parents lent her, and I used my share to put a down payment on a small condo near the school where I teach. During those months, we barely spoke. Everything went through our lawyers. But I heard things. Mutual friends told me she was still hanging out with the same group. Apparently, they were now her emotional support squad through the divorce. Some of those friends told me Sarah seemed relieved. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. I had made the right call. I also heard that Rebecca had made some comment about how Sarah was finally free from someone who didn't appreciate her value. Jessica supposedly said Sarah would have no trouble finding someone more on her level once she was ready. None of that shocked me. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew, they weren't just bystanders. They had orchestrated the entire downfall, and they were proud of it. I settled into my new condo and started the slow work of rebuilding my life. And pretty quickly, something surprising happened. I started to feel lighter. Happier. I hadn't realized just how tense I'd been, constantly trying to prove myself to people who had made up their minds about me long ago. It was a relief to finally live in a space where I didn't have to defend my job, my lifestyle, or who I was. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Maria at the grocery store. She greeted me like we were just two old friends who hadn't caught up in a while. She smiled and asked how I was doing, said she hoped there were no hard feelings. She seemed genuinely caught off guard when I didn't smile back. I looked her in the eye and told her that I held her and the rest of her little club personally responsible for helping destroy my marriage. That I saw right through what they were doing, and it wasn't kindness. It was manipulation. She got defensive. Said they were just being supportive friends, helping Sarah figure out what would make her happy. That it wasn't their fault our marriage had problems. But I told her those were normal marriage problems. The kind couples are supposed to face together, not with a panel of outsiders fanning the flames. I told her they took those problems and turned them into ammunition, that they made me feel like a failure in my own home, and convinced my wife that she had settled for less than she deserved. She tried to say Sarah came to them first, that they were just listening and being there for her. But I cut her off. I told her that real friends would have told Sarah to talk to me, to work on it, not to daydream about what life would be like with someone richer, flashier, more ambitious. That their behavior was cruel, whether they admitted it or not. The conversation ended with Maria walking away in a huff, but honestly, I felt good. I'd finally said out loud what I'd been holding in for far too long. I knew she'd go running back to the group, telling them I was bitter or angry or whatever story made them feel better. But I didn't care. I was done trying to win their approval. I was done trying to earn a place at a table that was always going to look down on me. About a year later, I heard Sarah was dating again. Mutual friends said her new guy was a successful businessman and her friends were absolutely thrilled. Apparently, they thought she'd finally leveled up. I'll admit, I felt a little sting of sadness when I heard it. But then someone told me her new boyfriend didn't like her friends. Said he thought they were too involved in her personal life. That actually made me smile. Because I knew what was coming. Eventually, Sarah would have to choose again, either keep her friends happy or protect her new relationship. And I truly hoped, for her sake, that she'd make a better choice this time. In the end, her friends were right about one thing. We weren't in the same league. But they were dead wrong about which one of us was settling.